Hello and welcome to the Hybrid Work Management presentation, where you'll learn about a four-part framework for building and leading a hybrid team in the new workplace. My name is Hassan Osman, and I'm quite excited about sharing some of this information with you today. So here's the agenda of what we'll be going through. We'll start with a quick speaker bio and background. We'll then get into why the future of work is hybrid, and then we'll cover the hybrid work model before we get into the meat of the presentation, which is the four-part framework. All right, let's start with a speaker bio and background so you know a little bit about who I am. My name is Hassan Osman, and I'm a PMO, or Program Management Office Director, at Cisco Systems, where I lead a team of senior program managers who are all remote on delivering complex IT programs. And by the way, I do have to mention that views are my own and not those of Cisco. I'm also an author of a few books about remote work, including Influencing Virtual Teams and Hybrid Work Management. I'm also an instructor of several courses about team management subjects on Udemy Business, and basically teach and write books about this topic. And then this little Venn diagram there gives a quick snapshot of my background. The project management circle represents my experience in the field. I've pretty much been in the project management domain for most of my career. Prior to Cisco, I was a manager at Ernst & Young, where I analyzed why projects failed at Fortune 500 companies. And then with the virtual team circle, I've actually been working with virtual and remote teams for over 15 years. So way before it got popular with COVID. And I actually work from my home office based out of Boston. And then finally, the last circle is about productivity. I'm a big fan of increasing productivity at the personal and team level, always looking for ways to improve processes and efficiency. And the intersection of those three circles, project management, virtual teams, and productivity, is where I spend most of my time. I run a blog called The Couch Manager about working remotely. And if you have any questions or you'd like to connect, you can find me at thecouchmanager.com. My email address is there, as well as my LinkedIn profile. I'd love to connect with you. All right, let's kick this off by discussing the two reasons why the future of work is hybrid. The first reason is that hybrid combines the benefits of both worlds. So when you look at the two extremes of work arrangements, one being 100% on-site and the other being 100% remote, the advantages of 100% on-site include improved team collaboration, better social interactions, improved creative output, usually due to face-to-face brainstorming, and more serendipitous discussions, such as those that are unplanned around the water cooler and hallway. And with 100% remote, those include better individual productivity for the most part, improved work-life balance due to flexibility and employee satisfaction, more cost savings from a real estate as well as a labor optimization standpoint, a lower carbon footprint, and finally more access to talent. And hybrid combines the best of both those arrangements. And if you do this right, you can maximize the advantages of each. The second reason is that employers and employees expect a hybrid work model. Now, the caveat here is that this is for the most part based on recent trends. There are always exceptions where some employers or employees advocate for either fully on-site work or fully remote work. But the data is clear when you look at it collectively. And you see a lot of those statistics pop up about surveys and studies of people expecting or preferring a hybrid work arrangement that mixes home and office work. So, for example, that 86% of people expect their organization to adopt a hybrid work structure, or that more than half of respondents said that they'd ideally split their time between the home and office. And if you think about it, it also makes sense for organizations to adopt hybrid work because it helps them prepare from a business continuity or disaster recovery perspective, where they become more agile and resilient to external factors in the future. Now, on the flip side, though, however, there's also a risk of not adopting hybrid work. And that is that employers who don't offer some form of hybrid arrangement could expect an increase in turnover, meaning losing talented employees to other companies. And that's because what happened was that during the pandemic, people got a taste of what working remotely feels like. And what happened was that they saw the benefits from both a productivity increase and a work life balance standpoint. So they might end up leaving to more hybrid friendly organizations if their current employer doesn't offer some form of flexibility. And here's one statistic from Bloomberg that highlights that around 39% would consider quitting if their employers weren't flexible about remote work. And among millennials and Gen Z, that figure was around 49% or nearly half. Now, of course, there are some exceptions based on the nature of the work or the business, but for the most part, employees will seek other options for similar positions that allow for more hybrid work. So let's start with a fundamental question. What is a hybrid work model? And the best way to explain this is to think through this visually. So let's look at a spectrum of where work gets done by employees. This can be done at the main office, which is your primary on-site location. Then there's flexible locations, shared workspaces or co-working spaces, or satellite offices, which are usually smaller in size than your main office. Then there's working from home. And finally, working from anywhere, which means you're location independent and could be anywhere in the world, including a sailboat. And the higher up you go, then the more remote you are. And the lower you are on the spectrum, then the more on-site you are. Now, there aren't any hard lines between those locations, but if you think about it, being fully on-site is really at the main office, and fully remote is working from anywhere, and hybrid is somewhere in the middle. So it's a combination of conducting work on-site and remote, and it overlaps and it cuts across multiple locations. But there's also another dimension that we should consider, and that is the dimension of time. Meaning looking at the spectrum of when work gets done. And this could be during set office hours, for example, work hours from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., or flexible office hours where you have some work hour flexibility. And finally, anytime office hours where you can work at any time. And the more you are to the left, then the more synchronous the nature of the work that you do, meaning team members need to communicate and collaborate closely in real time. And the more you are to the right of the spectrum, then the more asynchronous the type of work, meaning work among the team can be done at any time and information doesn't need to be exchanged in real time. And when you look at this hybrid work model chart along the two dimensions of where and when work gets done, you get those zones of the different types of arrangements, where at the bottom is mainly on-site, and the top is mainly remote, and then hybrid is somewhere in the middle. And you can start plotting where the different teams or individuals fall. So for example, Team A would work set office hours from either the main office or in flexible shared spaces or a local satellite office because their work requires synchronous and face-to-face communication. Whereas Team B, for example, might be a bit more flexible in terms of their work hours and can work mainly from home because they don't need to be co-located and they don't have to be always synchronous with their communication. And you can also look at this from an individual standpoint, where individual A has a type of job role where they need to be working mainly from the office during set business hours, for example, someone who's a nuclear power plant engineer who needs to be on site from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then individual B, who works in IT support, might be able to work mostly from home, but they need to be also working during the set office hours because their job does require synchronous and real-time communication with their peers. And then individual C, who works in design, might be able to work anywhere in the world and at any time because their work is project and deadline based and is highly asynchronous. So keep in mind that even within your same team, you can have different experiences and arrangements with some employees being more on-site and then others being more remote. And you can use this hybrid work model chart as a framework to help you think along those two dimensions. All right, so with that, here's a four-part framework for hybrid work management. Step one is to analyze, step two is to plan, step three is to manage, and step four is to evaluate. Let's start with step one, which is to analyze your team's hybrid arrangements. Now, to get your hybrid work model set up the right way, you should spend some time thinking about the requirements of your team and business. And here are a couple of tips to help you out. When analyzing your team's hybrid arrangement, focus on two separate but interrelated perspectives. The first is the job perspective, and the second is the employee perspective. Now, the job perspective includes analyzing the different roles, the different projects, your tasks, as well as the business and customer requirements. And the employee perspective includes analyzing the personal and career needs of your employees. Now, with the job perspective, you'll want to think about assessing the work time needs, such as focus or alone time, versus team collaboration or on site access time. Meaning how much your team needs to spend time on a task alone to focus on it versus how much time they need to spend collaborating with their team or in the office for on site access to resources. And with general roles and functions, keep in mind that functions and roles within an organization are not all equal. So, for example, lab technicians require more on site time than social media analysts who can work more remotely. And then, from an employee perspective, you'll want to think about assessing the personal and career needs of your team. And that's because inclusion and fairness are critically important to the success of a hybrid model. And although any hybrid arrangement is ultimately based on the needs of the business and the team, make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So try to be open and transparent throughout the process. And after all that analysis, you can come up with several hybrid work options. And by the way, to analyze your team's hybrid work model from both a job perspective as well as an employee perspective, you can use different assessment tools, including things such as employee surveys, customer surveys. You can leverage one-on-one discussions or even business process assessments and workflow audits. Tip two is to avoid a one size fits all. So as you come up with the options, keep in mind that what works for team A might be different than what works for team B because of many different factors. And that's okay. You are not going to have one solution that covers everyone. And as you look at your org structure, consider starting with your team first. So for example, if that's you, then analyze your team's hybrid work model first, in other words, your direct reports, and then move on to the rest of the organization. And if you're a second level leader, then this helps your own managers model the assessment after your approach. Now, one caveat here is that you will ultimately have to follow your company's hybrid plan, in other words, your boss's plan, and plug into it. But as you analyze this plan, it makes sense to look at your own team first. Step two is to plan your team's hybrid work arrangement. And this is where you'll spend some time thinking through what you're going to do and how you're going to communicate it to your team. And here are a couple of tips that help you out. Tip number one is to consider both work aspects. So when planning for your team's hybrid model, look at both aspects of work. The first is your operations, and the second is your projects. Now, your operations are your activities that typically produce the same product or service and keep the business running. And most of your work will fall here. And it includes things like producing financial reports or providing technical support. And your projects are your temporary endeavors that have a start and an end date. And they typically create a new service or product or even results. And those are usually time bound. Now, the operations plan is the main portion of your hybrid work management plan. And this is where you plan for different recurring schedules, such as your weekly and yearly plans. And you want to start with your weekly plans. So, for example, maybe 3 days from the office and 2 days from home. That seems to be the most popular type of weekly plan with organizations. And if you come up with that type of plan, you'll need to decide which days, right? For example, maybe Monday to Wednesday from the office, and then Thursday or Friday from home. And you can even alternate different schedules for different teams. Maybe one team goes with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and another team goes with Tuesday and Thursday. Or perhaps you might have a monthly plan where the policy is to work 30% of the time from the office and the rest from home. And 30% translates to 60 days out of 20 working days per month, right? Or maybe you have a yearly plan where the entire team gets to travel to a fun location once a year and combine both work and team activities. And the ultimate goal for both types of plans is to maximize the benefits of the team being together in the office. Tip number 2 is to plan top down and to start with operations and then your projects. So when you roll out your hybrid work plan, start by looking at your operations plan first and then work from the top down in your organization before you move on to your projects. And here's a simple example of what that means. So let's say you have 3 levels of plans: a company wide operations plan, a lower level operations plan, let's say your business unit or function, and a team level projects plan. And by the way, team level plans will be different plans for each team. And then let's say at the company level, the only plan you have is a yearly 3-day offsite that happens in early December, where the whole company gets together in a remote location for a 1-day update and a 2-day fun outing. And then at the lower level operations plan, you have a quarterly 2-day QBR or quarterly business review where all your business unit or division gets together in the office for a 2-day meeting on a quarterly or every 3-month basis. And what you'll want to do here is work from the top down to plan around the different events. So for example, your last QBR of the year might coincide with the yearly 3-day offsite. So maybe you can combine those where your own unit travels to that same offsite a couple of days early and has the QBR before the yearly offsite. And then finally, with team level project, let's say you have a specific project that you need to kick off with a 4-day visit to the office and close it out a few months later with another 1-day meeting in the office. Then similarly, you might want to work around your quarterly 2-day QBR, where you maybe move those dates around so that you're able to attend both. Now, you might have many other operations levels and projects plans, but the idea again is to plan it from the top down and prioritize operations plans over projects. Step 3 is to manage your hybrid team. So after you implement your hybrid work model, you'll spend most of your time managing and leading your team. And here are a couple of tips that will help you out. The first tip is to manage fairly. And here are a couple of things to think about. The first is to avoid a 2-tier system. Now, the top priority for a hybrid leader is to make sure that all employees are treated fairly. And the challenge is that hybrid models could create a 2-tier system of first class versus second class employees. In other words, 2 different employee experiences where those who spend more time in the office are treated as first class and those who spend more time remotely as second class. And they might feel left out or that they're missing out on opportunities. And promotions and career advancement are top concerns for employees. And some questions that usually get asked are, will I be promoted at an equal rate? Or will my chances be hurt if I don't show up regularly to the office? And potential leadership bias and favoritism can be avoided by constantly emphasizing inclusion. And by the way, this is a recurring point, and making sure that fairness is front and center is not only important when you're analyzing and planning your hybrid model, but also when you're managing your team. Another thing to consider is to focus on a remote first culture. Now, remote first means defaulting to working remotely for all employees. And it's a strategy where tasks can be accomplished anywhere, and it's one of the ways to ensure an equitable and fair environment. And a question that you can ask is, can both on-site and remote employees access company data and systems the same way? And you can centralize information and communication by leveraging technology. So for example, document repositories and collaboration tools. And this is just a great business practice for business continuity. And then finally, track and over communicate. So remote employees tend to be very siloed in nature, where everyone is working on their own thing. And this transactional feature easily leads to isolationism, where the whole out of sight, out of mind thing kicks in. And managers who are on site with their with other employees usually have more information about what those employees are working on. So keep track of what your team is working on and over communicate with them for extra visibility. You don't want them to feel like they're left in the dark, particularly again those who are more remote than others. And by frequently, over communicating with them and checking in with them, they'll feel like they're more supported as team members. Tip number two is to run hybrid meetings effectively. Now, one of the main activities that you'll spend a lot of time on while managing your hybrid team is meetings. And here are a few tactics that will help you out. First, conduct all meetings online, meaning all team meetings should be conducted as if everyone is remote, including your on site employees. And this is in line with the remote first culture concept that we just covered. And asking everyone to turn on their cameras really helps. A good idea is to share the video feeds of your remote participants on the conference room screen to make the team feel like everyone is connected to each other. And then mix up your hybrid breakout sessions. So if you need to have breakout sessions, such as for training purposes, the tendency is to have groups in the office huddle together and those who are remote huddle together. And while that might make sense from a logistics standpoint, think about inclusion by mixing up both groups. And then finally, consider a buddy system where you pair up an in office buddy with a remote employee to keep them informed during the meeting, and they can communicate with each other over instant messaging. The second tactic is to batch your meetings and leverage on-site collaboration where you schedule meetings that require face-to-face coordination on the same day or two in the office. This is also in line with what we covered in the planning step, where the goal is to maximize the benefits of the team being together in the office for your meetings. And you can also offer open office hours, where you schedule weekly or bi-weekly open office hours with a couple of options, one being on-site and another being online for fairness. And those could be used for non-urgent interruptions or questions that can't wait. And then finally, schedule in-person one-on-one meetings whenever possible to get the maximum benefits of on-site interaction. And if that's not possible, then video one-on-one meetings are second best. Try to avoid audio-only calls. The third tactic is to be cognizant of offline discussions. Now, important decisions are sometimes made in the office without the input or approval of remote team members. So consider setting some guidelines and protocols that help keep remote employees informed and included in offline decisions. And you can also use a common tool for documenting and approving decisions to help mitigate the negative effects of offline decisions as well. Step 4 is to evaluate your hybrid team's effectiveness. So after you implement and manage your hybrid work model, your next step is to figure out what's working and what's not. And let's start with 3 things you should know about evaluating your hybrid team. First, measuring and evaluating the performance of a hybrid team is complex. In fact, measuring regular performance in any organization is hard and not always straightforward. And hybrid just makes it a bit more challenging. Second, most performance measurement systems and tools can stay the same. So if you think about it, there's nothing really special about hybrid teams. What is different when you compare hybrid with traditional teams is where employees get their work done. There might be some metrics you have to reassess or add, but for the most part, the measures of productivity and satisfaction stay the same. Third, there are many, many different ways to evaluate and measure. You can slice it and dice it in different ways, and you can look at it by industries. You can look at it by different teams or different levels of how much you want to deep dive into those evaluations. And there are hundreds of books and courses and ideas that get into this topic. So it's an entire field. But keep in mind that there is no right or wrong here, right? So don't get stuck with overthinking it. And here is one framework that can help you out. And it's about defining your success factors and KPIs or your key performance indicators. And I like to keep things simple and think along 3 dimensions: individual, team, and customer to assess the overall performance and productivity. Now, your individual dimension includes your individual contributor metrics. The team dimension includes your overall team metrics, and those can be at different levels, even at the entire organization level. And the customer dimension includes all your customer related metrics. And by the way, the customer might be an internal customer or an external customer, or you might not even have a customer in some cases. Then, for each dimension, think about two different types of metrics: hard metrics and soft metrics. And hard metrics are those that are mostly objective and usually include data that can be verified. And soft metrics are mostly subjective and more related to feelings and perceptions. And here are a few examples of each. So, under the individual dimension, some hard metrics include reports produced and cases evaluated. And those are usually measured objectively. And some soft metrics include employee satisfaction and output, which are usually subjective metrics. Then, under the team dimension, some hard metrics include revenue generated and attrition rate, and those can be at your immediate team level or your organization's level. And a couple of soft metrics include team satisfaction and team collaboration. And then finally, under your customer dimension, a couple of hard metrics include cost savings and time savings for your customers. And soft metrics are CSAT, or customer satisfaction, and NPS, or net promoter score. And those are just some examples, but there can be many, many others. All right, so here's putting it all together as a recap of the 4-part framework. Step 1 was about how to analyze your team's hybrid work arrangement from two perspectives: your job perspective and your employee perspective. Step 2 was about how to plan your team's hybrid work arrangement by considering both aspects of work, your operations and your projects. Step 3 was about how to manage your hybrid team by managing fairly and running your hybrid meetings effectively. And then finally, step 4 was about how to evaluate your hybrid team's effectiveness by defining your success factors and including hard and soft metrics. And that's pretty much it. How to manage a hybrid team in a nutshell. Finally, keep in mind that this is not a one-time and done activity, but more of a continuous process. So as you get feedback from your evaluations and as your business or team progresses, iterate on this process by going back to step 1 so that you optimize your hybrid work model. Thanks again for watching. I hope you found this helpful. As a reminder, if you have any follow-up questions or you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email, you can reach me at my blog, thecouchmanager.com. Thank you and have a great day.